Welcome, one and all, to the August 26th, 2022 edition of the Signals from Mars live stream. Hello to Jose in the chat. And joining me from all around the world, we'll go clockwise with this. We have Mike Jones in New Jersey. We have Johan in Sweden. We have Jeremy in the UK. We have Brad Dahl in Utah. And in Kentucky, we have Ed. How's everyone doing tonight?
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
Awesome.
Cool.
Get the ball.
So, for those of you that are joining us live, for those of you that are listening to the replay, we are counting down the top tracks, or not the top tracks. We will get to the top 3 tracks, but the top albums of 1983. We are going to recap the top 15. We'll discuss the top 15, but real quickly, I'm going to run through numbers 43 through 16 to see what everyone picked. And, everyone is telling me off air in emails, and this happened to me as well. This was very hard because there are a lot of albums that could have been in each one of our top 10s. Now, the ones that are in the top 10 were voted by a lot of people, and that's why they're there. There are others that were voted by a few, so they're lower down. So anyway, let's start it off. 43, Triumph with Never Surrender. 42, Raven with All for One. 41, Pat Benatar, Live from Earth. Number 40, Manowar with Into Glory Ride. 39, Gary Moore with Victims of the Future. 38, UFO and Making Contact. 37, Slayer, Show No Mercy. 36, Ramones, Subterranean Jungle. 35, MSG with Built to Destroy. 34, Merciful Fate with Melissa. 33, Diamond Head with Canterbury. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Jeremy? How would you pronounce Canterbury in the UK?
Yep. Canterbury.
Canterbury. There you go. All right. 32, Misfits with Earth AD. 31, Kiss with Lick It Up. 30, Journey Frontiers. 29, Coney Hatch, Out of Hand. 28, Black Sabbath, Born Again. 27, The Rods, In the Raw. 26, Magnum, The 11th Hour. 25, ZZ Top, Eliminator. 24, Billy Idol and Rebel Yell. 23, these are actually 2 EPs back to back. 23 is Rat with the self-titled EP. 22 is Queensryche with the self-titled EP. And 21, Mama's Boys with Turn It Up. With these last 5 that I'm going to mention, yeah, Johan is saying a lot of great albums got passed. Of course. I mean, but this is like the last time when we did the thrash. Remember, Johan, you mentioned with Creator. And then as other bands started coming out, then you started to say, well, maybe they did deserve to be down there. It isn't to say that any of these albums aren't great, but there's just so much good stuff. So at 20, we have Crocus with Headhunter. 19, we have Savatage with Sirens. Number 18, we have Fastway with their self-titled debut. And I'm seeing that I screwed something up here. Number 17, all right, let me rectify this real quick because I did take the time to prepare this, but I just didn't upload it. Where are we here? I want to show this because I know that this almost made someone's list from a piece of paper that a dog actually was kind of chewing on. And there you go, Brad. and someone else who saw that list said, "Oh my God, I'm not the only one who thought this album was great." So coming in at 17, Huey Lewis and the News with Sports. So um, there's people. I mean, this was a big album back then, so I can't blame the people that voted on this. I realize that it's not completely hard rock or metal, but this was on the radio a lot back then. So, and coming in at number 16, an album that I personally thought would rank higher. But again, there's so many good albums on here. AC/DC, Flick of the Switch, number 16. So, Brad is saying that the Huey Lewis album was a great album. So again, I knew a lot of people that were into that album, and again, huge artist, huge album at that time. So 15, we take things over to the UK. It's a band that in the UK has always been big, but has never quite made it big in America. The name of the album is Script for a Jester's Tear. Jeremy knows what it is.
Yeah.
It's Marillion. Jeremy, is there anything you can describe to the folks who aren't familiar with Marillion what this album is about?
Yeah, it's they're kind of like a Genesis kind of band, sort of emerged out of Genesis. So very proggy, very bland. Obviously, got a very unique singer in Fish. I recently bought this album last year, and it's fantastic. And I probably would have just about put it on the top albums, to consider. So it kind of missed out, but that doesn't mean to say that it's not a fantastic album. There's some really great songs on it, but you've got to like the Marillion sound, and it's not. It's it's prog rock. So it's an acquired taste, really. Very, really popular.
Yeah, and like we're saying, the rules to this was that you could only pick 10 albums. So for those that aren't aware, that haven't listened to these specials that we've done in the past, I received the top 10, and number 1 gets 10 points, number 2, 9 points, number 3, 8, all the way down to 10, which gets 1 point. So there's a lot of albums here that if we went out to 15, if we went to 20, I'm sure more people would have voted on. But because we only did 10, we got that Marillion album there. So let's see. Number 14. There could be the first gripe of contention within the show. It is Thin Lizzy with Thunder and Lightning at 14. Johan, you've always said that Thin Lizzy is arguably the most important band in Sweden. See, Johan is writing, I protest. Johan, tell us about this album. It's obviously the one Thin Lizzy album with John Sykes. It's their heaviest album as well. What does this album mean to you?
Well, I'm not a Thin Lizzy expert, but this is an excellent hard rock album with, in my opinion, not a bad tune on that LP. So I don't know what went wrong here in the voting, but something, I don't know. Did you count wrong, Victor? No,
I did not count wrong, but again, the problem is a lot of people that voted on this was towards the bottom of the 10, so that means you get less points for it. And also, as Brad is saying, too many Americans voted. I think Thin Lizzy, and this is what I was listening to Decibel Geek a few weeks ago. For a lot of Americans, Thin Lizzy is Boys Are Back in Town and Jailbreak, and Thin Lizzy doesn't go beyond that. They're a band that, unless you really do a deep dive into them, they really didn't get played a lot in the US, but they were big for bands like Guns N' Roses, bands that came out after them. They were hugely influential. The thing is, for the mainstream, for radio, for your regular rock fan, Thin Lizzy, unfortunately, was limited to those two songs. Now you've seen all these years later, bands like Overkill and Mastodon covering songs like Emerald. Ace Frehley covered Emerald as well. So, within the music community, they're well respected. The thing is also, we're getting back to just 10 albums. And even if people voted on them, you'll see there's the top 5 have a distinct difference to the bottom 5. And then those 10 are way different than 11 through everything beneath that. So, see, there you go. Jeremy says it was in his top 10 or top 3, excuse me. Number 13. Let me find my place here. Okay, here we go. The self-titled debut by Suicidal Tendencies. This one ranked high for me. I don't remember if anyone here else voted on it. Anyone want to talk about this album?
For me, it didn't make my top 10, but it was 10A. It was one of the ones that I was really, really waffling on because it was hugely influential for me. I remember riding my bike to the record store to buy it and pedaling home with it, bouncing off my knee. Those songs are so just raw, and the videos that came out of it were great and huge back then. The introduction of the MTV generation and really getting us into harder and heavier stuff, and some awesome kind of one of the first really political type bands that I got into with some of the songs on there where they were commenting on what was going on in the world, and kind of opened my eyes for sure.
Yeah, and also for example, when we put the thrash list together, they were obviously there. They ranked pretty high there. Ed, you were a fan of a lot of thrash stuff. You listed DRI when we put that playlist together. Suicidal also, like DRI, one of arguably and possibly the most influential crossover band to really bring in a lot of like punk elements to thrash, which didn't have it previous to that. I really think that this album, again, as Mike is saying, truly influential because of that, because it brought different aspects that maybe you had a Metallica and a Megadeth and an Anthrax that had those sprinkles of stuff like this, but wasn't as full on as Suicidal was. And I truly think that this album really changed a lot of things for a lot of bands that were coming out after them. Ed, what's your opinion on this first Suicidal album?
I love this album. That's one that was hard not to put in the top 10. I don't think I heard this one until I was 16 and met one of my best music buddies. But this record was always something fun to listen to after listening to so many hours of thrash and heavy metal all the time.
Right.
It was something different you could put on and have a really good time. And to this day, that's kind of one of those records I pull out when I want to hear something different.
Right.
That's still fun and energetic and gets you pumping.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Okay, so on to number 12. Now, this album was a very unique album. And I know that Mark Striegel has said that this is his favorite album by this band. And it's unique because of the formation, because of there was a guitarist that left the band who went on to form another band who I already mentioned, who released an album in 83. Actually, at 19, we had Fastway. So I'm sure that may tip some of you off. Robo came into the band and we got Another Perfect Day by Motorhead. I mean, Lemmy is Lemmy. Motorhead had a specific sound, but Motorhead also had changes along the way, which I think a lot of people don't give them credit for. Another Perfect Day was one of those changes because Brian Robertson was so different coming from Thin Lizzy and coming from another side of things. What he added to Motorhead was a lot more layered and textured guitars than what Eddie Clark had done with them previously. And unfortunately, he only lasted an album because of butting heads with Lemmy. But I mean, just listen to the song "Dancing on Your Grave," which was the single off of it. I mean, that is completely different to anything that they had done with Eddie Clark before. It was showing that they could do different things. And again, I think that a lot of people say, "Oh, Motorhead's never changed." I think they changed on this album. There are some 90s albums that are very different. There's some of the latter albums that were very different where they were down tuning more and doing different things to, Motorhead did kind of keep up with the times here and there. So, yes, it was Lemmy and it was loud and it was still rock and roll, but there are different things along the way that I think that they varied enough of their sound to say that they did change a little. Anyone else want to speak to this album?
I just want to say it's a great album. One of my favorite Motorhead albums. Nothing to say more than you said, but great songs. Especially the opener is personal favorite of mine. But yeah, great album and great cover.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an awesome cover. All right, so jumping to number 11. This one may be a surprise to a lot of people as well, but we have to think of some of the other albums that were voted on. At 11, Power and the Glory by Saxon.
Yeah.
Mr. Dahl, we haven't heard from you yet with regards to any albums. I know that you voted for this. You've been chatting away here. He disappears off screen.
No, I'm back. I'm back because this album, this is how I tell time, is with this album.
Based on the album,
it says the big hand says it's time to rock.
There you go.
Yeah, so, well, there's the backside of the album. Yeah, cool picture disc. You remember these? Well, I guess picture discs. They were a thing.
I still have pictures.
This is an incredible album, I think. His first album featured Nigel Glockler as the drummer, and his playing on here is just it's out of control. I mean, well, it's in control, but it's just like he's gone nuts. And I've actually talked to him about that. I said, "Guy, didn't the producer say something like, hey, we need to rein these drums in a little bit?" Or the band thought, "Guy, what's this guy doing?" He said, "No." It said, "Just go for it," and he did. And but the songs are great. The songs are just fantastic. I mean, I can listen to the whole thing, top to bottom. It's every song kicks ass, and what can you say? If you've never heard Saxon and you want an album to start with, I would say this is a great one.
Okay.
Everything's clicking on here. The production's slick. The songs are all just good. It's I mean, they're really hitting their stride here with this album. So there you go.
Did you make the clock or did you buy it like that?
No, actually the drummer in my band made it for me as a gift.
Oh, okay.
He does this as a hobby, and he saw this in a record store and was like, "Oh, I'm going to get that for Brad and make a clock out of it." And it hangs on my wall here in the studio. So there you go.
There you go. That way you always know when it's time to rock. Awesome.
It's always time to rock.
Ed, believe it or not, Ed is saying in the chat, in our private chat here, that he wants to ride the Lightning one at a local store, which is like the equivalent of a Best Buy. They actually have they'll make clocks like that for you, and one of their examples is a Metallica clock, but it's newer because it's oh no, it is with the old M. It's just the M's like going around like as a clock, so it looks pretty neat. Jeremy, I'm sure you want to say something about Power and the Glory.
Yeah, well, Saxon are one of my favorite bands, and they released one over the the early 80s, and this one is up there. It's it's one of their better albums. It came after Wheels of Steel and Strong Arm of the Law, which were two superb albums, so they really had to keep the momentum going. And obviously Denim and Leather as well. So there was a lot of good albums. If you listen to it, the very last track, which is The Eagle Has Landed, still at the moment, and it's probably their best track live, even though they've got it just has a lot of atmosphere about it, and so I really like that track, and I like the album. I think it really rocks, and it was in my top 10 as well.
Cool. Anyone else want to say anything about? What was that? Go ahead.
No, just said, and it's a great clock.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear what you said. Sorry. Anyone else?
I do have to wait. Can I say something real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay, I have asked the members of the band what their favorite song to play live is, and Paul Quinn's favorite is "The Eagle Has Landed," because he gets a chance to really just go off on the guitar, and it always features a great solo by him. And Nigel, the drummer, his favorite song to play live is "This Town Rocks," "This Town Rocks." That's what's in there. Isn't it "This Town Knows How to Rock"? I don't know. Am I right, Jeremy? Or is the album right here? This Town Rocks.
This Town Rocks, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So there you go. Yeah. So two of Saxon's current members, their favorite songs to play live are on this album. I think that says a lot right there.
Cool. Anyone else want to say something about Saxon? All right.
I hope they come to the U.S. again.
Cool. So let's see. 15. Once again, we had Marillion with Script for a Jester's Tear. 14, Thin Lizzy, Thunder and Lightning. 13, Suicidal Tendencies with their self-titled debut. Motorhead at 12 with Another Perfect Day. 11, Saxon with The Power and the Glory. So here we go. Top 10. Before we get to the top 10, do you guys more or less think you know what albums will be in the top 10, or at least it within the first few positions? Do you guys think it'll be okay. All right. Let's see. At number 10, I think this is the only band on this list that changed their name after they had released a few albums. The singer guitarist was one of my first interviews, and one of my biggest interviews, actually. I actually re-uploaded it to Patreon. Brad is showing the t-shirt. He is indeed correct. So Circle does get the square for Brad. It is Y&T with Mean Streak. My introduction to Y&T was the title track Mean Streak. But Y&T is a band that I didn't kind of get into until later on after discovering that. But obviously this made number 10. A lot of people voted on this album. So, Mike, you're nodding your head. Give us a little Mean Streak here.
Oh, God. Like for me, I mean, it definitely made my top 10. Y&T I've seen live 23 times. So obviously I sort of like them. there's a picture of Dave Minichetti's guitar over my fireplace. So that's where they sit in my world. So yeah, I absolutely love this album top to bottom. You know, they still play most of the songs on it in a fairly regular rotation live. Not a filler song on that album at all. And you know, when he says keeping up with the Joneses is tough in Mean Streak, I mean, you got me hooked right there, like that.
Right. Well,
I think that was about when I discovered the band as well, and then kind of went back in their catalog and have been a huge fan ever since.
cool. Who else wants to say something about Y&T's Mean Streak?
Yeah, go on, Brad. You first.
Oh no, you're up. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that Mike's actually totally, you know, they're fantastic band. I've seen them live as well several times. Me really got into, you know, some great songs on there. Really, there, you know, you play it now and it still sounds really fresh, and I think that's a really good sign of a good album that you to it, and you still listening to songs with a sort of a little bit of a different ear, and that's a good sign.
Cool. Rad?
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is my very first Y&T album, and I fell in love with them the very first time I heard this. Every Mike is so right. Every song on here is great. They still play a bulk of these songs every time they play, and I have to say this: other than at a Rush concert, I've never seen more people air drum than I have to the song "Hang 'Em High," because there's that snare break in there, and everybody plays along with it. It's hilarious. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, don't you, Mike?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't stop yourself. Everybody's waiting for that break, and everybody jumps in. And it's kind of hilarious because it's not an honest thing. It's a great song too. I've seen them open with that a few times, and yeah, you can open with so many of these songs. Yeah, they're. I think, you know, the whole underrated thing. I think they're definitely one of the most underrated rock bands in the history of hard rock. I mean, they're just so good, and they're still so good, even though it's only Dave that's flying. You know, this original guy, but everybody in the band is still good, and there you go. I mean, yeah, some of their lyrics are pretty corny, but that's okay. It's fun, and they rock. And Dave plays his ass off, sings his ass off, writes great songs. He's a triple threat, man. And by all accounts, nice guy too.
This is the album with Midnight in Tokyo on. I mean, this, you know, what?
I'll say that a lot of people voted for that song. Actually, I was surprised more than the title track.
Which song?
Midnight in Tokyo.
Oh, interesting. That's one of my least favorite songs.
Really?
But I mean, it's like saying it's my least favorite type of pizza kind of thing. I mean, you know, Mean Streak's like pizza. I mean, some are better than others, but it's all good.
There you go. Up next at number 9. This is the band, although the title track also for this album got voted a lot. If it wasn't for this band, you'd never have Camouflage in hard rock and in metal. We're talking about Accept, and the album is Balls to the Walls. At the time, I remember when Udo was coming out with the Camouflage, people, you know, started thinking about Nazi Germany and stuff like that. And they didn't realize that it had nothing to do with that. It was actually just Udo trying to do something different that other people weren't doing. And sure as shit, that's probably a fashion statement that's still around today with metalheads that are still wearing camo. Whether it's green, black, gray, white, or any color in between. Camo is still a thing, and I don't know that everyone realizes, or some of the younger people anyway, that Udo was really the first guy to bring that into metal. Johan, you voted for this album. Um, tell us your take on Balls to the Wall.
Oh, it's a fantastic album. I remember the thing that they said, and this was back in the 1983, 84 ish here in Sweden, that it was kind of like a gay cover of the LP and the back cover, and that would be a bad thing. Today, that's a whole. Today, it would be a good thing that if you do a thing like that. So it's a big difference. I love the album, every song. It's classic, absolutely classic. I don't remember the camouflage thing, but the other thing that I mentioned was the big thing here. Sad to say. Yeah, I mean that album has some really good songs. I don't know what you American friends thinks about the album.
Yeah, Brad.
I would like to hear.
Yeah, Brad. Since Johan is calling out the Americans, go ahead. You voted for this one.
I did vote for this one. Yeah, it's a great album. And let's face it, Accept never has been that big here in America. They just haven't. I mean, I'd heard of the band, never heard one of their songs. Knew they were German and metal, and I'm like, well, the only German metal band I'd ever heard of was Scorpions, and I love them. So I figured, well, I'm going to love Accept. First time I heard him, I was like, what is up with this singer? And so I kind of, didn't really get into them because of Udo himself, his voice. But I was so wrong. I mean, later when I really started listening to them, and it actually happened when I saw them, when I saw Udo live, I fell in love with the guy. I mean, not in an album cover way, but in a musician way. I mean, the guy is he has a charisma. He's very charming. His voice is very odd sounding, but that guy can sing. I mean, he hits every note. I mean, he's not all over the place. He doesn't cheat on anything. He brings it every time I've seen them. He's been incredible. The song Balls to the Wall, I've played that a few times in a band, and I'll tell you what, when everybody plays that well, there's no more powerful song to play live. It's got such an incredible spirit to it, and it just rocks. And it's one of my favorite songs to play on the bass. So there you go. I think all you musicians here can agree if you've ever played it. It takes hold of you. So
Totally agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the video,
the rest of the album's really good too. But I mean, you can't just go with the one song. But it's a great album, great band. And now we still have Accept the band, and which they're really good. And Udo is really, really good. So go support them both, and get those UDO albums if you haven't heard them. If you kind of like Accept, you're gonna love UDO. There you go.
Go ahead, Johan.
Yeah, I was thinking about asking Jeremy how big was Accept in the UK in 1983, 84.
Yeah, they weren't a massive band in the UK. People were just sort of getting into them very slow. They become probably a little bit bigger later on. There was a lot of music time, so there's a lot of British bands, and obviously a lot of people getting into American bands. So to be, they were not the greatest band everybody was talking about, but I think it started to put them on the map a little bit.
Okay, and just to clarify, Johan, the title track got played all the time on MTV. Balls to the Walls, the video was on MTV constantly, and even though they weren't as well known, you have to think that a track like, and I know it's not on the album, but Fast as a Shark is probably one of the most influential songs when it comes to a lot of early thrash, because the double bass part I think that song and probably Bomber by Motorhead are the two songs that got everyone to play double bass. I know that, I've heard Lars Ulrich and Charlie Benante talk a lot about Fast as a Shark being the song that kind of, opened their eyes to want to play fast and play the double bass like that. So again, except even though they're not a lot like Thin Lizzy, even though the general public doesn't know who they are, probably the casual metalhead, the Eddie Trunk listening metalhead, probably only knows um, the title track. That said, um, Accept is still hugely influential to the overall genre. So I don't think that can be discounted at all. We welcome Mr. Anthony Mackie to the show. Hope you are doing good, sir. Thanks for joining us. So we are currently at number 9 with Accept and Balls to the Wall. And we move on to number 8, an album that I voted for. I was surprised that it only got to number 8. But then I started to think, because once again, we were only able to pick 10 albums. So there were so many massive albums to come out this year that, as great as this album is, it goes to show how good and how strong of a year this is, but also their biggest impact probably didn't come till an album or two later. And the band is Metallica with Kill 'Em All. As hugely important as Kill 'Em All is, in 83, within the voting here, it only got to number 8. Ed, you voted on this album. Tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was one of the hard parts. 1983 was like the most foundational year of my whole heavy metal music journey. And so, more than any other year, I was really struggling to weigh, the objective success and influence of an album to the genre of metal versus how much of an impact any one of those albums had on me. And I'm going to try to make my comments here without revealing the other albums that are probably on the list. But like an album that we'll probably talk about here soon that I put above this one is probably, I put it up higher on the list because of the moment in my music life that was to me. I've listened to Kill 'Em All probably 1,000 times more than a couple that I put, higher than that record. So yeah, that it was struggle. It was a struggle to make that balance. But of course, yeah, this record is one that I've listened to and still do, every month. It never leaves my playlist.
Okay. Johan, you were raising your hand there.
Yeah, Kill 'Em All is a great album, but for me, I didn't hear that album until later in my life, perhaps around Ride the Lightning. So I went back to hear it, and back then I thought it was, for me, a little bit too raw or too simple. I don't know. Or the most probably cause is that I was into other types of metal at that time. So that's why I didn't pick that one higher. But yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Anthony, you had this on your list as well. Anything you'd like to say about Kill 'Em All? Your mic isn't on. Okay, Anthony's gonna pass. Yeah, like I said, it's a hugely influential album, but I think a lot of people, like Johan said, probably didn't get to hear it until Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets because it was really under the radar. The band is as great as this album is. They didn't find their footing yet. Where as much as I love this album, I think once you hear Ride the Lightning, you're like, that's when they finally got their finger on the pulse and took that extra step. Again, not diminishing this album at all, but there's so many tremendous albums on here. I mean, the next album, I'm gonna look at this real quick between those that are here. I think almost everyone voted for this album. Almost. Let's see. Yeah. So, well, almost everyone, about half and half. This album sold, has a Diamond Award. So that means that it sold 10 times platinum. I was surprised to hear members of Armored Saint say that this album and the band's two previous albums were a huge influence on them and a lot of bands out in LA, because I didn't think, that they would cop to it because maybe it has a more polished, a more poppier sound to it than what the band had done previously and what these bands are kind of known for. But Ed, to your point, when we were talking about Metallica, number 7, Pyromania by Def Leppard. I just released an unboxing for the limited edition red vinyl today, up there on Patreon. This album was huge. I mean, if you're from that MTV generation, Def Leppard, was one of the first hard rock bands you saw all the time. I mean, you saw Photograph, you saw Rock of Ages, and you saw Fooling all the time on the radio, and then later, on MTV, and then Too Late for Love after that. So this was not only on MTV, but to this day, this still has all those tracks, plus Rock Till You Drop, get played on US radio every single day, without counting all the stuff from the other albums. So Def Leppard, although a UK import, a huge band in the US. Ed, you voted this number 1, if I'm not
Number
mistaken.
1. Yeah. Yeah, this was the start for me. Or when this album came out, it opened up a whole new world of hard rock into my life. I don't know what I've said in this group before. You may remember me in some of Mark's shows talking about my home life, and they wouldn't allow me to listen to any of this stuff. So I had to sneak everything that I wanted to hear. And when I got to 12, 13 years old and this album came out, about that time, a lot of friends and even my grandparents had cable TV in their house with MTV.
Right.
And these records, as stellar as they were, ended up being played on both the radio and MTV all the time. So, my parents could only keep me from that music when I was at home.
Right.
If I went to my friends or anywhere in town back then, of course, to school, to my grandparents, I was seeing Pyromania, and I can't put into words how much I loved this record. I couldn't count how many hours I've spent listening to it. And I still listen to it on a regular basis. And I could turn this into another 3-hour show talking about the record. So I'll stop there and let you all have some time with it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I just had my nephews here, and my big thing was trying to keep them off of YouTube because of some of the videos that they meandered onto. But when you talked about what you just mentioned, that was my folks with me getting on MTV, because we had someone in the family say, "Oh, that's just devil stuff on there, and it's a bad influence." And when my parents weren't watching, we'd be downstairs watching MTV and seeing if videos from Def Leppard or others that are on this list actually were getting played. Plenty of bands that we're still going to mention. I will honestly say that outside of one of these bands, they were all over MTV. So, Johan, I know that you voted this one high on your list as well. What was Pyromania? What was it like for you in Sweden, finding Def Leppard and finding this album?
I agree with that. Totally. It was, I bought this album in 1984. Totally blown away. It was a masterpiece. And I still think that it is a masterpiece to this day. I don't know. Every song is a hit. I don't know. I'm not shocked, but there are a lot of good records this year. But I thought it would be higher up on the ranking. Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, Foolin'. You just need Foolin'. Enough.
Yes.
No, just kidding. But every song is
right.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Pyromania, it's funny when I see Phil Collins do interviews and say how Hysteria is obviously, the best album that they ever did. Of course, that's the first one that he wrote on. So he's going to say that. But I mean, Pyromania, beginning to end, there isn't a bad song off of this. And for me personally, Hysteria has a lot of stuff towards the end that just is kind of okay. Where I do think that, even Billy's Got a Gun. I remember back in the day, Billy's Got a Gun was the B-side to either Rock Till You Drop or to one of the 4 singles. And I remember people were playing Billy's Got a Gun all the time saying, no, that's the best song off of the album. But you think about it, songs like Coming Under Fire and Stage Fright and Action Not Words, those are just as good as the singles that we all heard on the radio. I mean, this was a monstrous album. Jeremy, in the UK, what was it like for this album, when it came out?
Yeah. It was Def Leppard were just sort of finding their way. Obviously, they brought out High and Dry, and it was a really great metal album. And then this one came out, and you a big single Photograph was over here in the UK. I mean, it was enormous. Def Leppard were everywhere, and there was a lot of talk about Def Leppard going over to America and selling out at the time, but they were still absolutely huge, and they always have been. And so many hits on it, and they went on to produce another album, which we'll talk about a date when we do the next one. But this album really put them on the map, stars, and like you say, it's the MTV sort of era that turned them into real American stars. Not just UK stars, worldwide acts, really, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed, a few people here saying that they're shocked that it was your number one. See that?
I knew they would be. I'm having fun pulling that one on them there.
But again,
like I said earlier, that's me weighing, the difference between, how much I've listened to some things maybe over time versus the impact it had on me in the beginning. Because this was the year where I started having the chance to listen to a lot more stuff than I had in the past. And I was loving it. Yeah.
All right. So here at number 6, again, this one surprised me. It's surprising to me because this album wasn't as big of a seller as, say, Pyromania. It wasn't anywhere near as big of a seller, but obviously it was hugely influential on people. Let me see who voted on this real quick. Ed voted on it. I know Anthony voted for this as well. I did. And the person that would have been perfect to talk this album up, unfortunately, right before the show, notified me and a few others on Facebook that he wasn't going to be able to make the show. But Twisted Sister and You Can't Stop Rock and Roll is number 6. Now, again, this is an album that didn't sell as much. But given how big Stay Hungry was, I think a lot of people probably went back to it, much like Kill 'Em All. But also, man, the songs off of this that are good are great. They're not good. They're just great. I mean, I was looking at when I put the playlist together on this. I mean, The Kids Are Back, Like a Knife in the Back, Ride to Live, Live to Ride. We're Gonna Make It, and of course the title track, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. I mean, this album is just so good, beginning to end. And to me, you know, it's one of these things where it's mind-boggling thinking about how this album wasn't big in the States when it came out. You know, it was Stay Hungry was what made it big in the US. You know, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll was big in the UK before Stay Hungry was, if I'm not mistaken. And for us, I knew who Twisted Sister was, obviously because of growing up in the New York area. But also we had, in parallel to MTV, there was a station called U68, which was on the UHF band back in the day, which, you know, didn't come through to a lot of households. And U68, because they were based out of Long Island, played Twisted Sister all the time. So they played this video all the time. They'd have interviews with the bandmates saying how, you know, they're still trying to break through in America, and how in the UK they were accepted, and how Lemmy helped them, you know, get where they were in the UK, stuff like that. So to me, it was surprising that it didn't rank higher considering some of these other albums. But at the same time, you know, once again, there were people that voted for it plenty high, and that's why it got to where it was. Ed, what can you say about this album?
Now, of course, with Twisted Sister, I probably heard, you know, Stay Hungry first, and then went back into their catalog. And I just always remember loving this album. I mean, even today, I still like to put it on every once in a while. It's always a good jam. Like you said, it's chock full of good tunes.
Yeah,
it's a good soundtrack to 1983 kind of too.
Yeah,
kind of that, you know, mix of the good hard rock and metal sounds that were all beginning to happen, and has that good raw edge in the garage sound kind of, and just a good hard rock album with that heavy metal edge to it.
Absolutely. Johan, you wanted to say something?
I remember that album because it was in the, this is hard for me to translate, but in the records stores where they had cheap records.
Okay.
That one always was there. It was a record that probably didn't sell.
Right.
And the album before, Under the Blade, also was in the cheap records. You can buy them for almost nothing. So Twisted Sister exploded in Sweden in 1984 with Stay Hungry. But the records before were, I would say, nothing. Zero.
Yeah, it's the same thing in America. That's how it was. And like I said, with Stay Hungry being so big, it it made people go back and definitely check this album out. So that's Twisted Sister at 6. Just real quickly here, since we're starting the second hour of the show, and the subsequent podcast episode, this will be episode 299 of the Mars Attacks podcast. And real quickly here at number 10, we had Y&T with Mean Streak. Number 9, Accept with Balls to the Walls. Metallica with Kill 'Em All at 8. Def Leppard at 7 with Pyromania. And at number 6, Twisted Sister with You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. All right. So number 5. Number 5 is an album that was huge for me personally. This is the band that made me realize that there was something else besides Kiss out there. Because up until here, see, Anthony is, well, I shouldn't say the first band because I listened to a lot of stuff that my brother had, but it was the first thing that I purchased that wasn't Kiss. I fell in love with this right away. When I saw it on MTV, when I heard it on the radio, I'm like, holy crap, this is arguably heavier, or one of the heaviest things I had heard up until then. It was getting on Top 40 radio. Let's see who else voted for this. All right, Ed voted for this. All right, so me and Ed. All right. Yeah. But again, it was so high. I mean, out of the people that are here, other people voted for this that aren't here tonight. This album in the US was the first hard rock or metal number 1 ever on the Billboard charts. This was teetering on number 1 for the longest time throughout this week. And like I said earlier, on the last day, that changed. This started to fall down the list. There's a considerable gap between 5 and 4 and everything above that. But I was hoping it would be this. But anyway, at number 5, it is Quiet Riot with Metal Health. A lot of people know this from Come On Feel the Noise, from their cover. But before that, they released the title track, Metal Health, as the first single. And I saw that on MTV. I saw the mask. I saw the stripes. It was something completely different to me, and I ate it up. I loved it. I still love this album to this day. There's a lot of this band that I love up until basically Carlos Cavazo left, and they were never the same after. But all right, so
These guys are depressing me.
yeah.
Did you say you and I were the only ones?
Out of the group here, we're the only ones that voted for it, but there's other people that are not here present tonight that voted for this to be pretty high. This was my number 1. I'll admit to that, because I've listened to this album so much.
Yeah, it deserves to be number 1 on someone's list.
Yeah. Go ahead. For you, what did this album mean to you, Ed?
Well, this would have been my second heavy metal experience of 1983. You know, Def Leppard came out with Pyromania in January. And once again, the story will repeatedly come up with me. I'm at a friend's house who has MTV, and I saw Metal Health. And then another time when I was there later, saw Come On Feel the Noise, you know. And lucky for us, we had cassette tapes by then, so
right.
I could sneak that stuff in the house, you know.
Right.
And but yeah, that record I love start to finish too. There's not a song in there I don't like. I like Carlos. I love his guitar playing and his tone. Love Battle Axe. Yeah, and their little tribute to Randy Rhoads. It's It's an album I can listen to every second of anytime.
Yeah.
And you have to turn it up to 11. It's a Spinal Tap record. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a shame that they got so much of a bad rap after that, more so because of Kevin's mouth, more than anything else. But
Yeah, that's what it is.
yeah. Honestly, I do think that they put out a lot of. I think the first two albums are great. The third album was them kind of trying to fit in with everything else.
Yeah.
Fourth album with Paul Shortino, they tried to sound like Whitesnake by that time, and then the last few albums that they had, like I said before, Carlos left the band. I think all of those are solid. Unfortunately, a lot of them aren't in print anymore. But so Jose is saying that he voted it number one as well. So you can blame us amongst others. Brad, Party All Night was on the second album, not the first one. Again, an album that sold, because this one sold, I forget how many millions. Condition Critical sold half, so it was deemed a failure. But it was still like one of the biggest selling albums of the year. But because it wasn't number one, it was considered a failure by a lot of people, unfortunately. So, number 4. What did Johan say? I didn't see his comment. I like Condition Critical more. Yeah, Condition Critical is a really cool album. That's an album that when they remastered it, they missed remastering it correctly. Like when Rock Candy has done a lot of these, they've brought like all the sound up and made it, using today's technology, sound louder. Condition Critical is still an album that when they remixed and remastered, it still sounds very thin to me. Like the drums don't sound as strong as what they should sound as a drummer, but that's me being biased. Number 4. Of course, Ed voted for this. Mike voted for this. Johan voted for this. Anthony voted for this. And I voted for this. This is the Ed list. This one as well. First few days, it was possible that this would have been number 1. This number 4. I should have brought my CD. I've mentioned this several times. I did an unboxing of this. The European copy that I have is different to the US copy. It has different songs. It has different song titles for the same exact songs. For example, the European copy has a song called Forever. In the States, that's called Center of Eternity. The album also in the States has a song called Slow Down, which isn't on the European copy. The European copy has Spiders originally. Then all of that was released a million times and they're on everything now, but Bark at the Moon. So pretty much all of us here voted on this. Who didn't vote on this? Okay.
Don't think I did.
That would be Jeremy. So let's go here in clockwise here. Mike, Bark at the Moon.
Oh, wow. I mean, what can you say? Like top to bottom, all perfect 10 songs from, Bark at the Moon, You're No Different, Now You See It, Now You Don't, Rock and Roll Rebel. I mean, talk about the one of the ultimate rock and roll anthems for everybody of that generation. This was my first official concert, was seeing Ozzy on this tour with Motley Crue opening, which, I mean, that hooked me forever. And, Jakey Lee's playing was just exceptional. I mean, the guy just absolutely shredded, just completely tore it up. And I mean, what else can you say? The video for Bark at the Moon, this was, as you alluded to earlier, kind of the height of the Satanic Panic, and that really got that whole PMRC thing up and running. Seeing Ozzy as a werewolf and all, is fantastic. Like the visually, auditorily, everything, just this thing was cranked up so many times in my bedroom. And yeah, I can't count the number of times my mom came pounding on the door telling me to turn it down. It was just exceptional.
Yeah. Also, with my copy, "Rock and Roll Rebel" is the first song. It's not "Bark at the Moon." So I remember picking it up, thinking, "This is song number 4 in the U.S. How's this going to work?" But it works at number 1 as well. I mean, just the opening riff to that still gets you going, as the first song. But the title track is the title track. Johan, "Bark at the Moon."
Yes. Well, not on my top 3, but cool cover. I remember thinking back in the day, and that's why I bought the LP. The title track is still one of my favorite heavy metal songs for all times, even though it's overplayed, but I mean, if you don't listen to it every day, it's great. No, it's a great album. Not my top 3, but I would have liked to see Ozzy on that tour, because he was great back then. Great. Carmine Appice on the drums. Or Mike, did you see Carmine?
Yes, that was Carmine playing.
Ah, wow. So yeah, nothing more from me. Yeah, thank you.
Ed, "Bark at the Moon."
So this is the record I was referring to when I was talking about Kill 'Em All. I've listened to Kill 'Em All 1,000 times more than this record, but with this record was my first time that I actually saw Ozzy. I'd heard about this guy a lot because there were lots of rumors that went around, especially after he bit the head off of the bat, and all of my 6th and 7th grade friends had lots of tall tales to tell. And I don't know if I even remember seeing album covers at the record store. I just heard about this guy a lot. And then again, I'm at a friend's house late at night. He has cable. We got MTV on, and they play "Bark at the Moon." So, that was my first experience with, one of the heavy metal gods, Ozzy, who, of course, I love like everyone else. Jake E. Lee is one of my favorite guitar players. And I can just listen to that guy all day, or at least the chops that he had back then, at least were incredible. He could do all those things that all the fancy 80s guitar players were doing without, a whammy bar. He just did that on that simple guitar. He had ways to make those sounds on his own. And so he was always incredibly interesting to watch. But yeah, just the impact of seeing Ozzy for the first time had me putting this album above a record like Kill 'Em All. I said Ride the Lightning again earlier, didn't I? Keep messing that up.
That's fine. we understand
What I'm talking about. Yeah. It's the bourbon here. Sorry.
Well, you are in Kentucky. You have to drink what Kentucky is known for.
Actually, I'm drinking a New York whiskey tonight. Kind of weird, but it's good.
Isn't that sacrilegious?
A little bit. Don't tell anybody.
It's interesting with all of the guests that Ozzy has on this new album. They couldn't work shit out with Jake to have him on this album. It's kind of sad. Would have been cool, but again, to your point, Ed, Jake was such a monster back then. Unfortunately, substances probably diminished a lot of what he had, and as good as he may still be, as Brad is alluding to in the chat here, Sharon doesn't like him. Ed doesn't like Sharon, but yeah, this was also on Anthony's list, on my list. My neighbor had this on cassette, so again, because you could copy cassettes easily back then, he got the $3.99 cutout bin copy, and I got the Memorex copy that day, and I played this like crazy. You know, I absolutely love this album. I still listen to stuff off of this album all the time. I realize that, you know, it's not held in the same esteem as all the Randy stuff and some of the Zach stuff, but to me, the Jake stuff is as good as the Randy stuff, and as good as some of the better Zach stuff. That's just my personal funky taste. So, in any event, we are at number 3. Before we jump on to number 3, I wanted to mention the top 3 songs that were voted for the playlist. So, oh, okay, Anthony, you figured out how to unmute. All right, so give us your Bark at the Moon. Still muted. Uh-oh. All right. Well, next time, if you want to write something in the chat, just write it and I'll read it. I mean, whatever works for you. With any of these last 3 albums, if you want to comment on anything, I'd be more than happy to read your comments. So the top 3 songs, there were a lot of songs voted on, but there were 3 that everyone voted for more than anything else. It wasn't even close. These 3 eclipsed everything. The third most voted on song, and I should say that 2 and 3 tied. Okay. One of them we already mentioned. It's Metal Health by Quiet Riot. Tied with that for number 2 is The Trooper by Iron Maiden. So people voted, you know, Metal Health as important as The Trooper. It just worked out that way somehow. Number 1, the most voted on song. It wasn't even close, folks. This song from the start. This song was the most voted on song. The other 2 that I mentioned didn't even come close to this. This gets played on US radio every single day. Johan, you mentioned before, you've heard it so many times. It's Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne. You guys voted for this song more than any other song. So I made a complete list of 1983. The list is 121 songs long, so it'll be nice for everyone to dive in and listen to. It's a little of everything, and I think it'll be cool. I mean, I was putting all this together and thinking about how well the thrash playlist came out. I think you guys will be happy with this as well. So, anyone shocked that those 3 songs were the top 3 songs voted on by the patrons? No one seems to be shocked. Brad, you're raising your hand. What did you want to say?
Yeah, I'm totally shocked. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I think of our group as being, you know, more thinking about these albums like this rather than like this. So for the big song off the album to be the one that's picked, kind of it shocks me. Yeah, I figured we'd be more kind of deep cuts people, but I don't know. I probably picked a big song off of one of the albums, one of my top 10 albums too. But sometimes you have to. You have to go. You have to go with your favorite stuff, man. Listen to your heart.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that there were plenty of deep cuts picked, but I think that there's some of these songs that are just so big that it's hard to vote against them. You know, for I can honestly say that I voted for two of those three. One of those I voted for a deeper track. But because I've listed that deeper track more than the song that was picked. But I'll mention that probably later. But Anthony, do you want to see if the mic's working now?
I think it is.
The mic is working.
Yeah,
We can hear Mr. Mackey.
I had to reload the page. It just wasn't working. What do I got to say about that? Well, it's always funny to hear people's metal experience from the US, like how people get into metal through kind of mainstream avenues.
Right.
Like you always hear like this was big on the radio, this was big on TV. That is completely alien to me. Like metal here in Ireland, it was underground. Like talk about Pyromania. Getting Pyromania was this. What is this stuff that no one's heard of? Like you rock or metal on the radio, that's never ever going to happen. TV, probably on BBC or Channel 4 or something, but we get like UK stations. But that was rare, very, very rare. We had one TV show that went out on Sunday mornings that was 3 hours of videos. And you might get a Maiden at the very end if you were lucky. So it's just really, it's always bizarre to hear that metal existed in the mainstream somewhere in the world.
Well, yeah, here's the thing though. Back then, since MTV really needed content, I read a book by Greg Prato called When MTV Ruled the World. And they talked about how metal bands were just willing to do this stuff. So if you were fast enough to record 3-4 videos, they needed content. So they put it on because they needed to fill space. As the decade went on, that went away. That definitely went away.
Sure.
Yeah, and Brad is saying that it didn't exist in the mainstream until MTV. We're talking about, some of these were mainstream. I don't want to mention all of them yet because there are other things that are going to come out that I would say were on regular rotation. But there's a lot of stuff here that was, when we say, for example, Accept was on MTV, it was on Headbangers Ball. We're talking about after midnight on Saturdays,
Sure, yeah.
And radio for the most part was like that, in the New York area. You didn't hear Judas Priest until after 10 o'clock at night. Judas Priest was a band that you heard all the time, but it was after, you didn't hear Sabbath until the 90s. You only heard Run to the Hills and Number of the Beast. After 10 at night. You never heard, up until Stay Hungry, up until MTV, you started seeing Twisted Sister, Def Leppard, and a few others. Most of the stuff that I'm saying with, getting on MTV was late night stuff. Some of the other bands that we've already mentioned, AC/DC got played all the time. That never changed. Crocus got played a considerable amount at one point in time and then fizzled pretty fast, but because they needed content. Rat, which I mentioned, ZZ Top obviously got a lot of play. Journey obviously got a lot of play. Ramones got play, and Kiss got play. But out of the 43 albums on here, I mean, most of this stuff was word of mouth, late night, late night radio. If you had a quote unquote metal show, it was always after 10 o'clock at night. It was never during the day. and maybe you would hear, hey, let's play Living After Midnight by Judas Priest. That was the closest thing. Or Ed is mentioning Metal Shop. We had in my area, we had from when I was 12 or 13, I had Eddie Trunk because Eddie Trunk was local to where I grew up. There was a show called Metal Mania on Friday nights. It started at 11 o'clock and it was 11 to 1 every Friday. And Eddie Trunk was on for 3 minutes, the metal news. And then after that, he took over and then he started playing stuff. So, yeah, we never got Metal Shop out east. We had Eddie Trunk. We had Ian O'Malley on WNEW in New York, like Sundays at like 1 a.m. So that was one of these things where I would set my alarm clock, have a cassette ready to go. I'd push record on the cassette and just let it record for 45 minutes, half an hour, whatever cassette I had. And the next day I'd go back and listen to see whatever I picked up. And luckily in my area, when I became a teen, WSOU was something that I found out about, which was metal and punk 24 hours a day on a Catholic station. So go figure. But anyway, yeah, so I mean that's why I love having you guys for these discussions, because what happens in Ireland isn't the same as what happened, say, for Jeremy, isn't what happened in the middle of the US, isn't what happened in California, and isn't what happened on the East Coast. That's why, unfortunately, MTV had a big hand in killing that off, the regionality of music, where a band could be huge. Joey Vera of Armored Saint talks about this in one of Bob Nalbandian's documentaries, how Armored Saint had a career just in California because of the radio station presence and because you had like 20 towns you could play in and make good money. But once the playlist became national, that no longer happened. So, anyway, a lot of great banter going on back and forth, thanks to Anthony instigating it. He was the catalyst for this, but it's awesome. Again, I love hearing these stories. It makes these shows worthwhile, hearing all this stuff.
I must. Can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
I must say, I actually did vote for Bark at the Moon as the song from Bark at the Moon. Like, I haven't, a lot of these albums I haven't listened to in 20 years.
Right.
But going through the list of the albums that came out that year, it was so dense with memories and albums that took me right back to that time.
Yeah.
So I just sort of picked albums that really stood out. And I think recently I know on Facebook or something, someone posted the Ozzy on Top of the Pops doing Bark at the Moon.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was watching it, and it's brilliant, it's really, really good. And it just struck me at what a fantastically crafted song it is, so it's undeniably brilliant, so I had to pick that from that album.
We can thank Ozzy for writing that all by himself. At least that's what the credits say. the sticking point with Jakey Lee and with Bob Daisley. So Ed saying that's one of Jake's best solos.
Yeah.
So anyway, before we hop on the top three, actually I'll recount before we get to number one. But at number 3, again, in a album to me which is just great beginning to end. No bad song on it. Plenty of people voted it number 1. The only person that didn't vote for this album out of the people that are here is actually Anthony. The album. So we'll go around the horn here to everyone. The album is Holy Diver by Dio.
Number 3.
Jeremy, you were certain this was going to be number 1.
This is the biggest travesty in metal. This is going to be written about in the album. Didn't vote this number 1. This is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I mean, this is the greatest album yet, in my opinion. Obviously, not everybody's, so that's fine. Dio, he did everything in sort of doubles. I mean, he was on the 2 greatest Rainbow Black Sabbath albums, and then he was on the greatest 2 Dio albums as well. Obviously, the second was just as good. I mean, this is just an amazing debut album. You know, how many bands have covered the title track? Song is a killer song on it. He managed to carve out a sound of his own, a little bit like Sabbath. It's not. It's kind of different. It's edgier. It's more. He's put together a great band. They're all, you know, constantly at the top of their game. And I just remember bringing this home from the local record store. I mean, we had a record, Lane Records, and I brought it, and it was in my little white plastic, stuck it on my record player, and I was just almost crying because it was so good. Even today, you know, I can put it on, and there's songs on there, even songs like Gypsy, which I liked at the time. I just think it's great, and obviously the very last song, we all know about Don't Talk to Strangers and the title track, and you go on and on where there's not number 1. Obviously Iron Maiden are higher than this. That's fine. We'll talk about them in a minute. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, this was number 1 on several people's list. And it's interesting that you brought something up, that these songs could have been Black Sabbath songs. And because they couldn't work things out, they're a completely different entity. Mike, this was also your number 1.
It was, yes. As the aforementioned Iron Maiden and Dio were going round and round in my head as to who got top spot, but just the memories associated with this, you know, every song, end to end, all perfect. I think this was the first cassette tape that I popped in the car stereo when I got my driver's license in my own car, and absolutely wore the thing out. Again, just like every song on there, from Holy Diver, Shame on the Night, Rainbow in the Dark. I mean, just hit after hit, and every song is absolutely perfect. I mean, there is no doubt this is an absolute desert island album for me that I could listen to every day and never ever get tired of.
Cool. Brad, also your number 1.
Yeah, I have to second everything Mike just said there. I mean, this album, the very first time I heard it, somebody had sent it to me on cassette. I was actually serving a mission at the time, wasn't supposed to be listening to rock music. So none of these albums I bought during 1983. I bought everything later. But somebody knew that I had to listen to this, and they sent me a cassette of it. And of course, I listened to it, and I was so blown away at how good it was. I mean, I didn't expect Dio to be this great, and it was just the perfect formula. Those 4 guys, I mean, it's just fantastic writing. The sound of the album is great. The bass tone is like one of a kind. I mean, Jimmy Bain, nobody sounds like him. And it's an album that if I put it on, I can listen to it front to back. I don't skip a single thing. I never get tired of listening to it. There's not one song that's like, oh, geez, I've heard that enough. I mean, even Rainbow in the Dark, I mean, it's been played to death, but I'll never not listen to it. I mean, there's so many other songs like this. Well, like Bark at the Moon, I could, even though a lot of people pick that as their number 1 song, I could skip that song because I've heard it enough. But Rainbow in the Dark, I haven't heard that one enough, and I've heard it a lot. So every song on there is just great, front to back. So there you go, number one. If you didn't vote for it number one, it's because you haven't listened to it.
How were you able to listen to it? How'd you sneak listening to it?
Well, I did have a cassette player for various church activities.
But
So I could listen to a cassette, and yeah, if somebody sends me something, I don't know what's on this tape. I have to listen to it, and I had to listen to the whole thing because there might have been some personal message in there for me. And I'm not gonna lie, man. I remember we were teaching this kid, and we were in his car, and I said, dude, put this tape in your car and crank it because we had a really good sound system. And he was just blown away. I mean, this is a black kid in Memphis, Tennessee, and he's just like, I really like this. And that back then that totally went against everything, of that culture. And I actually gave him the tape because I'm like, yeah, you need to listen to this and spread the metal love, man, because I will one day go home and I will be buying this many times over, and I have.
So at what point did they call you a wolf in sheep's clothing, peddling metal onto the flock?
Never. No, man. I everything's from my heart, and metal is from my heart, and so therefore it's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with metal, man. And all these people who think that it's bad, you're just a dumbass. Okay, I'm going to say that right now. And if you like something that I think sucks, well, I respect you for that, but it still sucks.
There you go. Ed, Holy Diver.
Yeah, so I think I heard you talk about this once. I had a cassette called Masters of Metal.
Yeah.
That came out in '84.
Right.
And that had Black Sabbath, Trashed,
mm-hmm.
and then Rainbow in the Dark. So that was my first hearing both of those bands. And, Rainbow in the Dark I liked way better, much more intense. And not long after that then was the Last in Line record.
Mm-hmm.
And, they had videos on MTV. And, I instantly loved Dio from the second I heard that first song.
Right.
And Vivian Campbell's one of my favorite guitar players. But, I was just absorbing so many bands at that time that, I can't say that I listened to that record more than any of the others, but I listened to that just as much as everything I was listening to at that time. It's classic. And it never gets old.
Cool. Brad, did you want to say something else?
No, other than he cited every reason this should be the number one album of 1983. I didn't even talk about Vivian. Holy crap. Vivian Campbell, he was just a kid. His playing on that album is just unbelievable. His tone, his technique, his leads, the rhythm, it's a masterclass. I mean, yeah, Jakey Lee, his playing on Bark of the Moon is unbelievable as well. But I'm going to say that his tone isn't that great on there. I much prefer how Vivian sounds on this album. This is how this is how rock should sound. This album right here.
I would personally beg to differ with that, but it's all right that you're wrong, Brad.
No, it's okay that you're wrong.
Especially we're talking about poor old Vivian Campbell. Dio forced him to buy a cheap Ferrari. He wasn't making enough, and thankfully now he's employed by a band where he doesn't even have to write a single note on an album and get paid well. He doesn't have to play live. Anthony is saying Holy Diver is a better sounding album than Bark at the Moon. Yeah, I didn't want to tell Brad that. We don't want to agree with everything he says. Johan, Holy Diver.
Yeah, I remember when it was released. It was a game changer here. in Sweden. The opening track, Stand Up and Shout, is one. I can say to you now that probably if you want to open a concert, that's the song. Great song. You guys have said the most of it there. It's a complete album. It's a 10 out of 10 album. It's 1983, and I mean, the albums we have here are excellent, and this one is one of the best. So, I love this album. And as Vivian Campbell, great guitar tone. Yeah, all has been said. I love this album. It's a 10 out of 10 album. Thank you.
Yeah. All kidding aside, it does sound phenomenal. How the fuck did Black Sabbath go from Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, for all of the stuff that was said about Live Evil and how they, Ronnie and Vinny went in and messed with the board, and then Geezer and Tony Wood. How did Sabbath get the sound on Born Again? I mean, I love the songs on Born Again. It's got a certain thing about it, even though it's got the wonky sound, it still has a certain like aura to it. But man, just listen to how good those first two Dio albums sound. They kind of continued what Dio did in Sabbath. Brad is asking where Born Again was on the list. It was 28 on the list. So it was considerably down farther. Holy Diver and Bark at the Moon both got more than double the amount of points than Born Again. So number 2, let me okay. Number 2, let's see how many people voted on this. Ed voted for it. Again, as Anthony's saying, the Ed list. All right. Wow. Okay. So Ed voted for it. Johan voted for it. I voted for it. All right. So us three are the only ones out of the people here that voted for it. But this was voted for. The people that voted for this album, it was usually, for example, Ed voted this number 3. Johan voted it number 3. I voted it number 2. Anyone that voted for this voted it within their top 3 picks. So that's why this ranked so high. And it got considerably more votes than Holy Diver did. No, not Bryan Adams. There isn't another Huey Lewis screwball in here. Johan is at least agreeing with this. Number 2. Although the singer nowadays is probably best known for going, back then he was great, at least on the album. It is Motley Crue with Shout at the Devil. So, Johan, you voted it your second for the year, or no, third for the year. Both you and Ed did.
Yes.
Shout at the Devil. What did that, what was that like in Sweden? Because you have to admit, a lot of bands in Sweden, from Crash Diet to Eclipse and all these other bands, they still dress as if they, they just listen to Shout at the Devil. They're still trying to recreate Shout at the Devil. I think this was one of the most, if not the most influential hard rock album for a lot of these sleaze metal bands that are still going today in Sweden. So how big was Shout at the Devil in Sweden when it came out?
Okay, let me. And I'm sorry for my bad English now, but in 1984, the most legendary concert in Sweden in ever was Masters of Rock with Van Halen, AC/DC, and Motley Crue in 1984 in Stockholm. And the band that everybody talked about was Motley Crue. And they got a lot of press in the biggest, rock magazines. They got a lot of press, and I was, I bought the album, and for me, Motley Crue was my real gateway into heavy metal. You know, you open the gatefold. Gatefold is the right way to say?
Yes.
Yes. And the pictures, the songs, for me, that's one of the best hard rock LPs that someone ever made. And it's sad. I've seen Motley Crue a lot of times, but only in the 20 after 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really wish that I seen them back in the day. I know that some of you guys have seen them. So for me, Shout the Devil it's a part of my DNA. That's one of my most important records of all time. Thank you.
Anthony's saying they still never played Ireland, and horrible production. The remix and remaster that they did in the early 2000s sounds really good. They improved it quite a bit. I mean, with those remixes and remasters, it's always dicey because sometimes they just fuck with the albums too much and just kill like the essence. Instead of just making it louder, sometimes they remix it. Like Tony Iommi did that with Black Sabbath's Dehumanizer, and the first thing he did was tone all the drums down, which was like what stood out of that album. So, in my opinion, he killed it. But the remix and remaster of that is really good. Let's see, Ed. You also voted on this one.
Yeah. I just got done reading that book, The Dirt.
Right.
And, I could not be more disappointed in any of my rock stars than I feel after reading that book.
Right.
And just reading about the way they treated each other, not to mention the way they treated other people.
Right.
But that being said, those two records that they first put out are so wonderful that, you just got to put the artist aside from the music, And so Def Leppard, January, in March, we got Metal Health. That stuff was all over MTV and all over the radio. And because of that, even a lot of my friends that didn't care for hard rock and metal were into these bands.
Right.
So one of my best friends comes over to my house one day and he says, "You got to listen to this." And he had bought Shout at the Devil.
Mm-hmm.
He went over to my record player and he probably skipped the introduction because my mom's in the kitchen right next to my room.
Right.
But he laid the needle down on Shout at the Devil. And when I heard the tone of Mick Mars' guitar, the hair stood up on my arms. It was just the wickedest thing I'd heard to that point, and was instantly a huge fan. And that's one of the many records that I learned note for note on the tennis racket in front of the mirror in my bedroom before I started playing guitar. I know that album extremely well.
This was for me, I believe it was my number 2. Yes. Oh no, what am I talking about? It was my number 1. Quiet Riot was my number 2. I flipped them around. So I went off the top of my head and screwed that up before. this, and it makes sense because I have bootleg upon bootleg upon bootleg from this tour, from the demos of these songs. I mean, the original version of Shout at the Devil is like 2 minutes longer with like this long like outro to it, and Mick Mars is soloing all over that, and the riff is slightly different. It's a little bit more complex. And it's one of these things where Jeremy, the Decibel Geek did Bootylicious, yes, Demolicious the other day. Bootylicious is a wrestling thing, excuse me. But some of you guys follow Decibel Geek, and that song, I'm sure it's up on YouTube. The end of it, I remember the first time I heard even the demo, thinking, "Why the hell did Tom Werman cut this?" I'm like, "This is just so cool." The way that this used to end, but I get it. They were probably trying to get this on radio somehow, and of course, because of Satanic Panic, that didn't happen. But I remember seeing the video for "Looked at Kill," and I was like, "Holy shit! These guys are like dressed up like Kiss, kind of." And the riffs are heavier, the drums are heavier. It sounds like Creatures of the Night. This is right up my alley. As you said, it kind of fits in with what the Quiet Riot album sounded like. And, let's be honest, for people that grew up in that area, there was the constant back and forth between Quiet Riot and Van Halen for the longest time until Randy took off to play with Ozzy. So, I mean, I think that really influenced why this became a big album. Also, Quiet Riot and Motley Crue both played the US Festival. Ozzy did as well. So that's why these three albums are so huge for a lot of people as well. So,
and again, it was perfectly made for MTV, those videos. Yeah.
Absolutely. You get to Too Young to Fall in Love, which they sparingly play anymore. But the video, I remember seeing that. I'm like, wow, this is like marrying a kung fu movie with a metal video. I'm like, what's this? It was combining two of my worlds there, movies and music. So it was ridiculous. Anyway, so let's count down once again the top 10 here before we get to number 1. No surprise, it's Glenn Campbell, but no. Let's do 10 to 2 real quick here. Let's see here. So 10 was Y&T with Mean Streak, excuse me. Number 9 is Accept with Balls to the Walls. Number 8, Metallica with Kill 'Em All. Number 7, Def Leppard with Pyromania. Number 6, Twisted Sister with You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. Number 5, Quiet Riot with Metal Health. Number 4, Ozzy Osbourne with Bark at the Moon. Number 3, Dio with Holy Diver. Number 2, Motley Crue with Shout at the Devil. And number 1, I thought this was the year for the longest time until the last day when I started getting all these people voting like crazy. Iron Maiden's Peace of Mind, number 1. I don't think that came to much people's surprise. If we look at the list here, Jeremy voted it at number 2. Ed voted it number 7. Mike number 2. Brad number 2. Johan number 2. Anthony number 5. And I voted it number 5. So it was number 1 on a lot of different lists. Trying to see here. My brother voted it number 5. Steve voted it number 7. My cousin Gabriel, number 1. and Chris voted it number 3. So it was on all but one of the lists. So everyone, I'll call on everyone to talk about it. Let's go with Anthony. Peace of Mind in Ireland. What was it like for this album to come out, and what's your recollection?
Well, let me think. It was big. It was big amongst our, metal crowd, because we'd all been, pumped up on Maiden for the last year. So, Maiden were the band for many years.
Right.
I don't know what else there is to say. There was huge excitement, and it delivered.
Had they played Ireland by then?
No, Maiden didn't play Ireland until like Bruce's last tour, like a Real Dead one. That tour.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was the first time Maiden played Ireland.
Okay, yeah, so that's like 92-ish.
Something like that. Like we definitely missed their peak.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's a conversation I had with my kids going through their discography this week. That up until Seventh Son, from the first album to Seventh Son, that's a hell of a run. From like 80 to 88 with Seventh Son, if I'm not screwing the year up. I mean, that's
I probably wouldn't go as far as Seventh Son myself, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, I think that they're all classics. You could argue which of those is their best, but I mean, there was definitely a big drop off after Seventh Son. To me, when Adrian left the band, I mean, a lot of people talk about Bruce leaving. Adrian and his songwriting, I think, was a bigger hit to the band than Bruce leaving the band. Hell, there's even a track on No Prayer for the Dying that was still co-written by Adrian. But yeah, even Peace of Mind, if you think about it. I know that, again, referencing Decibel Geek, they were saying that Peace of Mind wasn't one of their stronger albums. And I'm thinking, hello, Revelations, The Trooper, Die With Your Boots On, Where Eagles Dare, Still Life. I mean, to me, it was between Still Life and Revelations as my vote, because I've listened to both of those songs so much, and I love both of them so much.
Yeah, Still Life was my vote. My vote.
Yeah. So
I just loved how it felt like a weird song at the time, and I love that.
Absolutely, but it's funny. It's so atypical, but it's still so them at the same time. Again, referencing Seventh Son, I think Infinite Dreams was another one that was like similar to that. But anyway, that's a conversation for another year. Ed, Peace of Mind.
So I first heard, what is it, Run to the Hills on that Masters of Metal compilation.
Right.
And then, as time went on, collected those first 5 albums, by the time Power Slave had come out. And, there's, in those first 5 records, there's not a song I don't like. And so Maiden was one of those bands. Like, I can't really say that there was any one Maiden record that I just listened to all the time more than the others. Just,
right.
Maiden was just, they just become a part of your heavy metal life. And you listen to some Maiden, then you listen to something else. And you listen to some more Maiden, you listen to something else, And Peace of Mind, gosh, yeah, what an awesome record. Just as good as Number of the Beast. And my favorite song is probably Revelations. I like Still Life, though. Isn't The Prisoner on that record, too?
That's on Number of the Beast.
Okay, got that wrong. One of my favorite tunes, though, too, Where Eagles Dare. I think that's one of the heaviest songs. And there's a band, kind of a thrash metal band from the 90s called Deliverance.
Right.
And a few years ago, they did a remake of Where Eagles Dare with a real heavy guitar tone. And, man, it's perfect for it. It's perfect for a good heavy remake. Yeah, I love that record. Yeah,
you mentioned that about their discography up until then. Again, my 9-year-old, who is exploring all types of bands that I'm into, thanks to Apple Music, stumbled upon Virtual 11 yesterday and says to me, "Why did they include horns on this album? There's trumpets. Why does Iron Maiden have trumpets?" I said, "Yeah, that's we'll have you ask Steve Harris in a few years." But yes, there's definitely a drop off in the quality. The man that voted "Where Eagles Dare" as his favorite song off of Peace of Mind, Johan, what was this
Yes.
album like when it came out in Sweden?
Well, as I said before, no, perhaps not that, but Maiden is the biggest heavy metal band in Sweden, and this album for me is perfect. Some songs like Quest for Fire has perhaps some lyrics that are questionable, but it's a 10 out of 10. And the song Where Eagles Dare is, I mean, wow, that's a good song. I know, I mean, I've seen them so many times, and they play too few songs from this album. They should skip The Trooper, of course, live. But I mean, this is a 10 out of 10 album for me. It's a perfect heavy metal album. I bought it when it came out. No, not almost when it came out. And I mean, it's wow. I love this album. This is for me one of my biggest heavy metal history moments, if you say so. It's wow. Jeremy, what do you think of Peace of Mind?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's one of their better albums. It was amazing that and it really pushed them on, I think, in many ways. Some really good commercial hits on it. Flight of Icarus was brilliant. Nobody's mentioned Die. It's a great song. I always go to that as one of my first songs on the album because it's just one of those songs. And I think it was great because Nico comes onto the album. I'd followed Trust, in what they were doing, and then he comes in, and him and Steve, just amazing. If you listen to it, still listen to the drumming and the bass sound on the album. So to me, I'm not really listening to just listening to those two knitting together as a pair. And this was the early. It was great, and I think the side A of that album is a real killer. Side A. In the old days, you had just the vinyl, so you flipped it over, and then of course the Trooper comes on. Wow, you're looking at your friends who's in the same room as you, and you listen to the album together. What an album this is!
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, for you.
Another huge one. I came into the Maiden fold with Number of the Beast and went backwards from there. And then when this came out, I got it, close to about the release date with no internet. Just wandering through the record store and seeing that cover and going, oh yeah, I got to buy this, and popped it on. And again, like everybody else said, I mean, perfect album, great songs. Just the the addition of Nico. I don't know how you go from Pat Travers to this, but he definitely nailed it. I got some good metal credit in high school with this one. In a mythology class, I got to play Flight of Icarus, thanks to Iron Maiden, live there in a high school class, and one of the shining moments of my school career for sure. So thanks to Iron Maiden.
Yeah, that's interesting. We got to do that with several English teachers, but with Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. So right up there. Brad, for you, Peace of Mind. What was it like when this album came out? I'm assuming you were in California at that time still.
No, I was actually somewhere in the South, probably Tennessee.
Right. Okay.
But I didn't, and nobody sent me a tape of this. What the hell is wrong with my friends? Yeah, so I didn't hear it till later, and but unbelievable. This is I felt like it was the incredible thing about Maiden is that I felt like at this point every album was better than the one before it. I don't know if that's true or not, but it just felt that way. Felt like, holy crap, this is a band that just keeps getting better and better and better. For me, the difference between 1 and 2 is the last 3 songs on here. I'm not saying they suck. I'm just saying they're just kind of like, whereas with Holy Diver, the last 3 songs are great. So there. It's a fantastic album. I love the sound of it. I love the performances, and I love most of the songs on there. So, and they even got better on the next album. How is that possible? But can we have a list other than the thrash list where Iron Maiden's not number 1? Is that possible? We'll find out in '84, right? No,
Well,
they'll still be number 1.
Yeah. Well, remember that the year that Live After Death, hopefully a lot of people don't decide to start voting live albums that year. And then after I'm assuming that after Seventh Son, we won't we'll see them on the list probably, but maybe not as high. But we'll see. I could be wrong. I thought as things started out that maybe this was the year, but
no, we're going to wait and see when we do the best albums of 2022. We'll see what gets number 1 there.
You think that Stool Jitsu will be on there?
Yeah. Did it come out in this year or was it last year?
I don't remember if it was this year.
I don't remember when the calendar turned over.
Usually when I don't like an album, I try to forget about it. So
fair enough.
Don't know.
I kind of feel like maybe it was last year and it already was number 1 last year.
Yeah, I guess it was.
I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was. I think you're right. Anyway.
Yeah, so maybe this will be the year that Iron Maiden doesn't make number 1.
There you go. For me, echoing what Ed said before, Masters of Metal was such a huge album to me. I can thank Kim Gladish, who begged me to allow her to come to my birthday party in 3rd grade because she says, I promise I'll buy you something really cool. It had Masters of Metal is what she bought for me, which had Black Sabbath Trashed and Crocus Screaming in the Night and Twisted Sister, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, and Rush, Tom Sawyer, and what else was on there? Dancing in the Streets, Van Halen, Street of Dreams, Rainbow in the Dark by Dio, and Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden. That was my introduction to Iron Maiden, and they just blew me away. Little did I know that they would become, that them and Kiss would become my 1A and 1B, basically. For years, I only listened to Maiden. It was just ridiculous how much it was. Peace of Mind is the first Iron Maiden album that I purchased. I was at the age where I could actually start buying a considerable amount of music, and I got to Spain, went on a long hike the day after we got here, and one of the parishioners that went along, the son had Live After Death, and he said to me, what's Bruce saying between songs? And that's why, if you guys have heard me sample Bruce before Revelations during the trivia show or whatever, it's from Live After Death. It's because that's what this kid had me translate for him, where he says, this song is about, or this is what, or no, this is about washing a pair of curtains. It's called Revelations. No, I'm thinking I used the one before Rhyming the Ancient Mariner. This is what not to do when a bird shits on you. Sorry. Anyway, to my point, I went to the store and I bought Peace of Mind and Live After Death for myself. I said, I want 2 albums. I love this live album, but I also want a studio album. And Peace of Mind was the cheapest one I could purchase. So that's what I bought so that I could afford both. And I loved it from day one. Beginning to end, I absolutely love this album. I've listened to it so much. With Maiden, Maiden to me is a lot like what Johan says about Metallica for him. I've listened to Maiden so much that I stopped listening to them for like 2 or 3 years because I just couldn't listen to Maiden anymore. I just went through that cycle where I think it's happened to all of us with certain bands. But I love them. I still listen to them so much, and this album was hugely important to me, and there's a reason why it is number 1 on the list. There's a reason why The Trooper was voted the second most out of any song that people submitted. Maiden is just huge. They will go down as one of the biggest and most important metal bands of all time. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. As much as I'd love to see another band take number 1, I get why they're number 1 year after year with every album that they put out, because they're just hugely monumental landscape albums. Throw any cliche you want out there. They're all important. So, real quick question. I've asked this on Trivia Tuesday before, so I don't know if anyone will remember this or if anyone knows this. The song To Tame a Land had a different title originally, but had they have used that original title, I see Mike going to Wikipedia real quick. What was the original name? Had they have used it, they would have been sued. They didn't get permission. Does anyone know what the original name of To Tame a Land was? Johan?
It's something about Dune.
It is Dune. The song was supposed to be called Dune because Steve Harris loves writing about movies and books. Hence why you have Dune, you have Where Eagles Dare, you have so on and so forth. He loves his horror, he loves his war movies, he loves his history books. So there you go.
Yeah, why couldn't they call the song Dune? I don't know that's
because the family of the guy that originally wrote Dune, they asked for permission, much like they did for The Prisoner. They were allowed to use The Prisoner. They were allowed to use Where Eagles Dare, for example. But the family of the guy that wrote Dune said they couldn't use it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you could use it for a song title.
You'd get sued because it's an intellectual.
Shouldn't have asked.
Yeah, shouldn't have asked. There you go. But you're open to getting.
I don't know. That's interesting.
He's
right. He's right. They shouldn't have asked. They should have just called it Dune. But
he names characters throughout, or their characters named throughout the song, and there are different things. There's the ocean, which I forget the name of it. It's named in the song as well. There's a bunch of different references to the book, so
yeah,
that's why they would have had to change everything.
No, the book is better than the song.
I'll take your word for it. In any event, this was a massive list. This was a massive show. It was an important show. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for joining me tonight. I want to thank everyone that voted. I keep saying this. If you want to vote during upcoming episodes, if you want to have your voice heard, become a patron. You can do it for $2. I know that some people have said, "Oh, you're always talking about Patreon," but if I don't bang that drum, nobody else is gonna. So I got to do it anyway.
Wait! I'm happy to do it, Victor. Really, $2 a month is too much for you? Come on, get another job.
There you go.
It's worth being part of this group. I mean, look at these guys. These are like the coolest people on this planet. All over the world, we've somehow drawn this group of really cool people that we all like metal, but we all like little different things about metal. Well, except for Iron Maiden, and yet we're all friends. And Yeah, if you're going to pay $2 a month to have great friends, you're getting a deal, man. So $2 a month, pony up the dough, just join us. Then if you're an a-hole, well, we don't want you. So there.
There you go. Any other parting words from anyone? Anyone wants to say anything else before we end this? Does Iron Maiden conquer 1984 as well? They released is Power Slave 84?
Power Slave, yes.
Yeah, they're going to win. There's not going to be a better album in 1984 than Power
That's a
Slave.
clear number one.
Arguably their biggest album. So anyway, Jose, thank you for being in the chat, and thank you for the kids, for Ferran and Iñaki listening as well. The entire family, that is great. Anyway, yeah. Anyone else want to say anything before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'll say this. 1983, what an incredible year that I couldn't listen to rock music at the time. But I'm glad that I've been able to listen to it ever since. So great albums. And I'm going to go back and listen to that Quiet Riot album. I'm going to give it one more chance. So we'll see what happens. You guys are the best, man. Thanks for being friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that. And I think we can maybe disagree on the order of the albums, but I think that all of the albums, we could agree that the majority of them are all great, good to great albums. So it was a tremendous year. It was a hard list to put together. I'm hoping that 1984 will be that difficult. That's a good problem to have. That means there's a lot of good music that came out. So on that note, for Jeremy, for Mike Jones, for Johan, for Ed, for Anthony, and for Brad, we're signing off. We will see you next time right here on the Signals from Mars live stream. Remember, next week, Signals from Mars will become episode 300 of the Mars Attacks podcast. It is the end of the Mars Attacks podcast with that episode. So we will see you next week for that. See you.